The bus was just driving normally on the road, but a car behind it kept honking frantically. On this narrow country road, the bus had no way to give way, so it continued moving at its usual pace. Little did the driver know, this simple action completely enraged the man in the car. The driver of the car slammed the accelerator to the floor. He swerved onto the grassy roadside to overtake the bus, and in an instant, he forced the bus full of passengers to stop. The bus driver still had no idea what was happening, but the man yanked him off the bus and punched him hard in the face. To everyone's shock, the man then pulled a pistol from his waistband, right in front of the terrified passengers. The bus driver was shot and collapsed on the spot. Seeing the man's ruthless demeanor, the passengers froze in fear. They hurried back into their seats, silently praying. But in the chaos, Sally's phone accidentally slipped under her seat. She reached down, trying to grab it, but it was already too late. Another gunman had boarded the bus, and he demanded that all passengers hand over their money and valuables. Terrified, Sally quickly removed her diamond ring and earrings. She handed them over to the robber. She thought that would be enough to keep her safe. But just then, her phone on the floor suddenly rang. The sound immediately caught the gunman's attention. Sally hurriedly tried to press her foot over the phone, but the robber dropped to the floor and snatched it up. The ringing continued, so he answered the call. It was Sally's boyfriend on the line. The moment he realized it wasn't Sally speaking, he began shouting angrily, but his words only brought disaster upon Sally. When the robber saw her beautiful face, he dragged her off the bus. Sally tried to fight back, but as a young woman, she was no match for these men. In no time, she was thrown into the trunk of their car, and the vehicle sped away. By the time her boyfriend finally arrived at the scene, all he found were the shaken bus passengers, but Sally was gone without a trace. At this moment, the car stopped in a desolate and deserted place. The thugs dragged Sally out of the vehicle. They threw her into an abandoned train carriage. Right after, one of them pulled out his phone. He was ready to film the entire process of humiliating Sally. Sally was terrified, screaming as she backed away in panic. She desperately tried to escape from the nightmare that was about to unfold, but her resistance only made the thugs more excited. They were like cats playing with a mouse, enjoying every second of torturing Sally. The louder Sally screamed, the more thrilled they became. In her panic, Sally knocked the phone out of the thug's hand. But to her horror, the thug slapped her hard across the face. The blow sent her collapsing unconscious to the ground. Seeing her pass out, their excitement instantly vanished. To make sure Sally was truly unconscious, they pressed a lit cigarette against her arm. When they saw she had no reaction, they finally relaxed. But just as the men were arguing over who would assault the girl first, Sally suddenly opened her eyes. She quietly crawled out from the other side of the carriage. For a moment, she thought she had escaped death, but right then, she ran straight into one of the thugs who had gone to fetch water. She was about to be dragged back again. Sally fought back with every ounce of her strength. In the heat of the struggle, she clawed at the thug's face. The pain forced him to loosen his grip. Seizing the chance, Sally grabbed a metal bucket from the ground and hurled it at him. When the thug collapsed to the floor, dazed, she lifted the bucket and smashed it down hard on his head. However, her desperate screams from earlier had already drawn the attention of the other thugs. When they reached the carriage, they realized that Sally had escaped. They immediately followed the direction of the sound to track her down. For the sake of survival, Sally could only run as fast as she could. By the time the thugs caught up, all they found was the lifeless body of their companion. Sally had vanished without a trace. Looking at their comrade's gruesome death, the leaders swore that no matter what, they would hunt Sally down. Terrified, Sally kept running across the barren land. She thought she would soon find her way out, but after running for what felt like forever, she realized she had circled back to the same place as before. Only then did Sally understand. She was completely lost. But she had no time to think. She could only run for her life. Unexpectedly, in her panic, she slipped and fell. She almost tumbled into a deep well that seemed bottomless. Seeing the well was several stories deep, Sally even considered climbing down the ladder inside to hide. But now it was too late. The shouts of the thugs were already echoing nearby. She quickly searched for cover to hide herself. Then, while the thugs weren't paying attention, she frantically changed her hiding place. Just then, her phone suddenly rang. For Sally, this was like seeing a ray of hope for survival. She rushed forward, grabbed the phone, and quickly ran to another spot to hide. By the time the thugs arrived, the phone that belonged to her companion had already vanished. Once Sally had the phone, The first thing she did was call her boyfriend. She told him she was being chased by a group of thugs, but before she could say much more, the sound of footsteps grew closer and closer. Luckily, the thugs didn't discover where she was hiding. Wanting to find his girlfriend as quickly as possible, her boyfriend had no choice but to follow the police back to the station. Soon, he received another desperate call from Sally, but just then, Sally accidentally dropped the phone into the well. The loud splash instantly alerted the thugs. One of them quickly followed the sound and walked up to the edge of the well. To avoid being spotted, Sally pressed her body as close to the edge as she could. Fortunately, after circling around for a while, the thug didn't notice anything unusual. Seeing this, Sally quickly climbed upward again. In the pitch-black wasteland, she kept running in circles. Then, to her relief, she suddenly spotted a rusty sickle on the ground. Her fear lessened just a little. She gripped it tightly and continued her desperate escape. But just at that moment, the thugs discovered her and cornered her against a wall. In order to survive, Sally pleaded with them, saying she would agree to any request if they let her go. What they didn't know was that she had already hidden the sickle behind her back. Moments later, a scream of agony pierced the night. Sally, terrified by what she had done, ran once again. When the other two thugs arrived, their companion had already bled out and lay lifeless on the ground. At that point, the thugs made up their minds. No matter what, they were going to eliminate Sally. Unbeknownst to anyone, Sally had already begun her counterattack. She deliberately tore her own dress, then placed it in the corner of the wall to draw the criminals' attention. Sally knew very well that these men would never let her go, so she decided to launch a desperate fight back. Sure enough, one of the thugs was quickly lured over. Seeing this, Sally seized the chance and ran with all her strength. She tricked one of the robbers straight into the bottom of a well. Then she picked up a huge rock and smashed it down. By the time another thug rushed over, his companion was already lying dead at the bottom of the well. Only then did the criminal finally realize he had underestimated Sally. At that moment, Sally had already escaped to a railway crossing because she hadn't eaten all day. She eventually collapsed on the tracks from exhaustion. Soon after, the last remaining thug spotted Sally lying on the rails. Luckily, Sally heard his voice in time. Dragging her weary body, she stumbled into a nearby cave. Just then, the roar of an oncoming train thundered across the tracks. The train was closing in fast. Sally picked up a rock and hurled it wildly at the thug. The train was almost upon them. The thug lunged forward and wrapped his hands tightly around Sally's neck. In the nick of time, Sally bit down hard on his hand. When the train finally rushed past, Sally thought for sure the thug must have been crushed to death. But the very next second, she felt something grab her ankle. The thug was clinging to life, begging Sally to save him. Without hesitation, Sally grabbed another heavy rock, and she ended the monster once and for all. At last, Sally managed to reach the railway watch station. She borrowed the staff's phone and called her boyfriend. She had finally regained her freedom and her new life.